Hello and welcome back. Today, I'm talking about fear. I'm talking about the all-encompassing fear that accompanies complex PTSD, that follows you around like a shadow, and that you have to deal with 24/7. And while I don't want to make it sound like people that don't have PTSD or complex PTSD don't understand what that's like, the reality is that I know in my case, like when it comes to CPTSD, in my life, there was a distinct before and after. Okay. Now, I probably had CPTSD in childhood, but as I was getting older, it was dormant for a long period of time. And so that was the before. And I know when that CPTSD kicked on, where my nervous system changed, where my ability to be me changed, and there was a distinct after. And if I was to be honest with myself in that dormant period of time, if people talked about the fears that I'm going to talk about in this video, I think it might have been hard for me to understand. Like as an empath, I would have wanted with all my heart to understand their feelings, but it would have been a tiny bit like they were speaking a different language. And that's somebody that had childhood trauma. So imagine people that haven't ever been through that, or maybe they're in their dormant stages as well, and they haven't realized the trauma that they've undergone. Either way, the reality is that sometimes people don't get it. So what I wanted to do with this video was talk about 10 fears that individuals with complex PTSD have to deal with 24/7. And I'm hoping that it validates those that are feeling this so that you know that you are not alone. You are not the only one. And hopefully at the end, I can provide some tips and support that can be useful. Fear of being yourself. Most people live life just being. They're just being themselves. That's completely normal. There's no thought or overthinking that accompanies being you. It should be automatic. Anyone with CPTSD was taught that being you was not safe. And because it wasn't safe, and because possibly in childhood or through a long-term toxic relationship, whenever you were you, something bad happened. And as a result, the constant authenticity, pain, authenticity, abuse, authenticity, something negative, that constant pattern that you were experiencing became imprinted in your nervous system. And now you can be totally all alone. All you want to do is be you. And your nervous system, let alone people outside of you, your nervous system tries to stop you because it remembers, that implicit memory remembers that being you isn't safe. Do you know what it's like to feel like your nervous system has hijacked your conscious awareness, or your conscious decisions, I should say? That's what it's like having CPTSD. Fear of trusting people. And I'm not even talking about trusting toxic people. I'm talking about trusting healthy people. When I was on my recovery, right, and I was going through a process where I was really bringing a lot of unconscious or subconscious material into my conscious awareness, and I was really becoming aware of my thoughts, I couldn't believe the things I thought about people, as if my subconscious had this story that an emotional or mental or physical grenade was about to go off, and I had to be so hypervigilant for when and who was going to set that off. Now, this is understandable. Again, it's understandable because if you had childhood trauma, the people that should have been the safest for you, like your caregivers, were the very ones that hurt you the most. And so again, that imprint in your nervous system is, if those people hurt you, imagine people you don't know. And so your nervous system is like stuck in hypervigilance. Fear of being happy, fear of doing something, chasing after your goals, accomplishing your goals, letting go of things that are painful because you know it's good for you. There's a fear that if you do those things, you'll be happy. And this is sad. This is sad because most people want that, right? But if you have CPTSD, especially if it was because of toxic relationships where somebody had a personality disorder that whenever you were happy was when they attacked the most, right? So every time you're happy, you get insulted, you get emotionally abandoned, you get rejected. There's some kind of negative consequence. Again, boom, there's the theme in all of these is that the nervous system gets imprinted. And the nervous system is now like, being happy is really dangerous because something bad is going to happen. And so because of that fear of being happy, whenever you have an opportunity, your nervous system will flood you with hormones, with cortisol, with adrenaline, with hormones that make you feel uncomfortable and unsafe because it's trying to shut you down. It's trying to hold you back. Now, we might think that, oh, our nervous system is our enemy. No, it's not that. It's just that it was trained by somebody that you could consider possibly an enemy. It was trained that that's dangerous and it thinks it's keeping you safe. But the bottom line is that fear of happiness will be like an invisible ball and chain around your ankle. As you're trying to move forward in life, it is trying to pull you back because it's afraid that if you get too happy, something bad is going to happen. Fear of the sensations that come up in the body. So there's a lot of information about how the body is the subconscious mind. And by that, what that's implying is that whatever our subconscious beliefs are show up through sensations in our body. Let's say I believe I'm a bad person if I make a mistake. And so I'm about to start to try to do something new, right? And that subconscious belief kicks on like, oh, if you fail, you're bad. And I'm about to try something new. My body is what begins to feel uncomfortable. So it's making known what's in the subconscious. Okay, now here's the thing with CPTSD. So much is stifled in childhood or in a long-term relationship. So many painful emotions which are attached to painful beliefs are stifled. They're never processed. There's no one there to really help you to understand what's going on, to help you to work through it, which would enable you to process it, right? So everything you're stifling, we stifle as a survival skill. It was too overwhelming in the past, so we stifled it. The problem is that in the present, what is stifled needs to come up for processing. And so the subconscious mind is always looking for these tiny little similarities. And when it sees something, it touches on what's stifled, it comes up and you experience what's known as an emotional flashback. And when you're in that place of feeling those sensations come up in your body, you feel them from the age that you stifled them. So if at 3 years old, you had to stifle abandonment, the pain of abandonment that was interlocked and kind of morphed and molded together with survival. When somebody says no to you or somebody rejects you in even a small way, that sensation that at 3 years old you could not process comes up in the body, and it is so uncomfortable. It is so uncomfortable because we don't understand it, because logically, whatever's happening on a conscious logical level, your brain's like, this is not a big deal. Like if this person doesn't like me, oh well. But your body is saying something different. And it's because it's these stifled emotions that are coming up. And so we begin to fear what's coming up in the body. And when you fear what's coming up in the body, we can make the mistake of thinking that it's the external. And so we start avoiding. We start avoiding because we don't want to feel those overwhelming sensations, which make us feel powerless and as if our survival is out on the line, and helpless all at the same time. And so we avoid those emotions. Sometimes we do so by overdoing, right? We get really, really busy. Sometimes those sensations push us to have bad habits bad vices. It could be an addiction of alcohol. It could be an addiction of shopping. It could be an addiction of vegging out. It's something that the body does to try to avoid those sensations in the body. So there's a fear of what can be going on in your body. Imagine living life, walking around, not knowing what's going to trigger those overwhelming sensations in the body. There's an intense fear of what other people are thinking about you, or the fact that other people are judging you. Now, again, this fear is kind of out of balance as an adult, right? Like if somebody judges you, it might hurt, right? But there's no reason for the level of fear that's coming up in the body. So why is it there with people that have CPTSD? It's because in childhood, the people that rejected you and judged you were linked with your survival. And you needed them to like you because you felt like your survival was on the line. That belief doesn't get updated just because you grow. Like we might grow physically, our clothes size grow, our body grows, we grow in many ways, but our subconscious beliefs do not get updated automatically. Not like our phone. Like I'll get a message on my phone that says, click to update. Sure wish that could happen with our subconscious mind, but it doesn't. So our subconscious mind, if we haven't done the inner work, we have this fear of people judging and people and of what people think, because somewhere deep down in our subconscious, okay, this is not our conscious mind thinking, someplace in our subconscious, there's this belief that, you know, our survival is on the line, or something really, really bad and detrimental is going to happen if they don't like us. So I'm just going to leave it there. And because the fear is so intense, and because childhood trauma causes you to be overly focused on the external, you are so aware of every little thing that everyone's doing, every little facial expression, every little thing that's going on. And there's no ability, or it's not that there isn't an ability. There is an ability. It's just that it hasn't been practiced and it's very weak, right? But the ability that we don't seem to have access to at those moments is the ability to ask yourself, like, what do I think of me? Like, how do I see me? And how do I see this person? But it's all like the brain gets stuck in this fear of they're judging me. What are they thinking? And what do I have to do to make sure that they're okay with me? Talk about major energy leakage, fear of your own thoughts, and fear that you'll never be able to break out of the trauma loops that are taking up so much real estate in your mind. Okay, so every inner dialogue that we have, every inner voice was once an outer voice. We internalize the things that we hear, especially the things that we hear repeatedly and with intense emotion. So if we had caregivers that repeated a theme in our life, right? That theme might be, there's something wrong with you. You're bad, you're less than, you're not worthy. And it was just repeated over and over and over and over. And then you're healing, right? And you're on your healing journey and you're doing so much work. And let me tell you, it is work. It's not easy. And so there are times when you can think, I am never, ever going to overcome this. There's this fear that you will never heal. And I know because I had that fear. It felt so almost like going against the wind. You know, you're going in the opposite direction of everything is pushing you one way, and to heal, you have to do the exact opposite. And it wasn't easy, but it was a fear. It was a fear that these thoughts are going to be there forever. These thoughts are going to be torturing me forever. I'm never going to be able to overcome them. I'm never going to break out of the trauma loops. I'm never going to ever, on and on, fill in the blanks. But it's that fear that you're never going to be able to be your true self without the trauma. Another strange fear, and I say strange not because I don't understand it, but if I hadn't gone through CPTSD, I would have a hard time understanding it. And that's fear of doing things you love, fear of engaging in things that you know you have talent in, fear of enjoying the talents and passions that you as a unique individual possess. There's a fear of doing those things. In my face-to-face coaching, I've worked with people that were extremely talented, and due to their complex PTSD, they could not touch the instrument that they were talented in, or sing, or paint, or do any of the things that at one time meant so much to them. There is this intense fear. Now, it was created by somebody outside of self. But the annoying, frustrating thing about CPTSD is that when that person leaves, that fear of doing those things doesn't get packed up and leave with that person. And so you can have this fear that you'll never be able to do the things you once loved again. And so somebody stole something from you, and there's this fear again that you don't have it in you to be able to. And it's so frustrating because it's one thing to have somebody outside of self, but now it's like you against you, like you're fighting yourself to do the things that you love, all because of the fear of what happens in your body at the thought of doing those things. Fear of telling people what's going on inside of you. There's a fear of telling people because you yourself at times barely understand it. People that don't have CPTSD, people that have not been through certain traumas, trying to explain it to them can feel like you're trying to teach a blind person color, and it can be very invalidating. And so there's this fear that if I tell them and they don't understand it, then it's like it's tearing a little bit at my own reality. It's not allowing me to keep my own reality. And so there's fear in opening up and being honest. Just to quote somebody, Britney Spears to be exact, I remember when she was finally talking up about what was going on with her family, and somebody said something like, "Why didn't you say anything?" And she said, and it really broke my heart because this is exactly the fear that I'm talking about right now. But she said, "I was afraid no one would believe me." When you have CPTSD, if it's not that people don't understand, some people flat out don't believe it, because part of having CPTSD is explaining how you got it and from whom. And that's can be really hard. And that invalidation is just too overwhelming for somebody to feel safe enough to open up about. Then there's a fear that maybe, just maybe, the horrible things that you were told about yourself for so long, maybe they're true. There's a fear of that because in childhood, when you're told really horrible things about yourself, as a child, you can't say, "Wow, my parents are really screwed up. Like, that's really messed up that they're like that. They're horrible. They don't know what they're talking about." Children can't do that because they need their caregivers. And it doesn't feel safe because basically what you're saying is the person that's responsible to keep me alive is messed up, and oh my God, I'm on my own. I'm dead. This is not going to happen. Like it's too dangerous. It's just too dangerous for a child to think that way. So the child doesn't say, "That's messed up what you're saying." They look at self and say, "Wow, I am screwed up." And so somewhere along the line, if somebody was constantly telling you something negative about yourself, you may have internalized that. And when you internalized it, you agreed with it, not on purpose, but you had no choice. If you're a child and somebody's ingraining this in you, you don't have the emotional capacity to process what that parent is doing so that, that stays their junk and you stay, you can't. And so it gets all intertwined inside. And then if that parent ingrained it over and over and over and over, then kind of peeling that away from who you really are and how you can really see yourself is kind of like, have you ever taken two colors of Play-Doh? Yes, I have kids, so this is something that we did, okay? Two colors of Play-Doh. And at first, when you put them together, you can still peel them apart quite easily. But imagine putting those two colors together and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing that Play-Doh over and over and over to the point that they are no longer two colors. They are one color. There's no ability to see where one begins and the other ends. Well, your self-identity, because of what a toxic caregiver tells you, gets intertwined and embedded together with your authentic self. And peeling those apart is not easy. It's not easy. And so when you're feeling how much of a struggle it can be, there's this fear that, well, maybe because it's so hard, maybe what they said was true. Maybe I just am a screw up. Maybe I just am a failure. Maybe I just am worthless. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe other people can be successful and I can't. And the last fear that I'm going to mention is probably the most overbearing, and that is the fear of fear itself. You're so afraid to feel the fear. You're so afraid of when that fear is going to pop in for whatever the reason is. You're so afraid that you are powerless when it does come up in your body. You're so afraid of what it says about you. You're so afraid of the fear that the only thing that feels safe to do is isolate and close out the world. So I don't want this as I'm going. I almost started crying, but I wasn't really my intention to make this like a depressing video. I really didn't want this to be a depressing video, but what I did really want this to be is a video to validate the fact that I get it and that I'm not the only one that gets it, that there are people out there that really understand how overwhelming it is to live like that. Not only that, they also understand what it's like or what's involved in excavating yourself from the inside out. It is a process. It is not an overnight thing. So if you're on this journey, hang in there. CPTSD is not a life sentence. It can be painful and it can be a hard struggle. I'm not going to lie and pretend it's not, but it's not a life sentence. And if you're willing to do the inner work, little by little, you can shed those side effects. You can shed those fears. You can untangle the coping skills that came about as a result of complex PTSD so that you can find and uncover your authentic self and you can create the life that you want. Now, if you're struggling to do this, make sure you check out the description box below the video because I list a ton of resources that I have. Some are free, all are affordable. In those resources, I share with you the very things that helped and are still helping me. So make sure if you're struggling to check them out.